I just watched American Fiction, and I thought it was a great movie as far as black people movies go. I was really surprised because I assumed it would just be kind of an American Society of Magical Negroes situation where someone eschews their actually hateful views under the guise of satire. But this movie was not like that at all. I think what makes this movie work so well is at its core, it's just a good movie about a guy and a family having their struggles. He's having some internal struggles with his morals and his principles because they're inversely related to his career and financial success, which he needs. And while it obviously pokes a lot of fun and satirizes the views and treatment of Hollywood and corporate America toward black people, those are left more broad and a bit more to the comedic component of the movie. And while they're obviously story important, they don't dictate his character or his family, who are just very human. They're very normal. I think they're relatable to anyone, regardless of skin color, which is a really smart move by the writers. I'll give a quick plot synopsis before I get into why I liked about it and why I think it works so well. The story is that Thelonious Ellison, his nickname is Monk, is a writer. He's very respected. He's a professor, but financially, he hasn't had a ton of success with his writing. And he gets put on a leave of absence because of sensitive college students. And he goes home to deal with some health issues that his mother's having. And you find out he's really disconnected from his family. He's very out of touch. He's been living in California. They're in Boston and Arizona, but he doesn't keep up with them. He very obviously hates the stereotypical portrayal of black people in media in general. And because his mom has dementia and is going to be very expensive to take care of, he's really stressed about the finances. And then his sister suddenly dies. His sister was a doctor. His brother's a doctor. His whole family is very successful. Their dad committed suicide when they were younger. So now they need to figure out how to take care of their mom. And he hasn't been super involved. He's just kind of a flawed man in that regard. So he gets drunk, writes a book on a whim that plays into all the stereotypes of black people and finds sudden financial success. He's getting an offer for $750,000 for the book, an offer for millions for a movie before it's even published. And and the book is called Pathology, Pathology, instead of pathology, because he's leaning into the stereotype of black people and the way they speak. So internally, he's struggling with this contradiction of his morals. He hates all this portrayal of black people in media, but he needs the money for his mother. And externally, he's struggling because he's trying to start dating this woman. His family has their own issues. His brother's broke from a divorce. He divorced because he was gay. Now his kids hate him. He's kind of having like a midlife crisis, hooking up with these younger dudes. He's trying to please his agent. He's pretending to be this fugitive with a warrant out for his arrest because he wrote this book. So he's kind of tried to hide behind his pen name, but can't do so completely. He gets put on this board as a literal diversity hire to give out this publishing award. So they have all these books to read and give feedback on, including his under his pen name. And the end, which is okay, but a little bit pretentious and artsy for my taste. It turns out his whole story is a movie. So then you're left to wonder how much of it's real or is it all real? And he's just trying to figure out the ending for this movie, which is the movie in the movie, and kind of which way you want to go with it. But overall, great movie, a lot of really good humor. It's nice to see some actual social commentary that seems relevant. It's also nice to see a black family that's just kind of a standard American family. They've all got jobs. They've got family shit going on. They've got their own problems that have nothing to do with race. They don't speak in the typical ebonics that you get in half the movies that black people are in Hollywood. They're just people trying to get by and get through life like everyone. And I think that is what makes it such a good movie, is that the satire is left to the more big picture thematical things, and the serious stuff is the personal stuff and the character parts of the movie. So I just want to go through and talk about some of the things I liked about it and why I thought it was such a well-made movie. There's a really funny element to the movie where they're discussing the current most popular book by a black author and about black people.
Tara Golden. You haven't read her?
No, what's her book called?
Raves.
And I just love that they make the most famous book this just super fucking racist black stereotype book. They say acts and talk like idiots. All the same shit that you look down on uneducated people with in general, not just black people.
Yo, Sharonda, where you be going in a hurry like that? Donna asked me when she seed me coming out the house. Ain't none your business, But if and you gots to know.
But also doing the kind of bullshit talk show. And then you find out that her background is just some upper middle class, went to college, went straight to working for a publisher, writing about the quote unquote ghetto black experience. There's a really funny part where his books should be in the mythology category, but they're in African American studies, literally just because he's black. And he's trying to move all his books, and some poor kid at the bookstore is like, you know, I have to move them back, right? And it's not like our decision. It's a corporate thing. And I think part of the reason that works so well is because of how realistic it is. For people who don't really pay attention to movies and TV, look at these franchises and how many times a black character shows up in the music, which has been rock music or classical or orchestral in general or pop. Every time it's a black person, it feels like it's suddenly a rap song. So this kind of shit is everywhere. And I think that's what makes the satire so good, is because it actually is relevant. And how many movies do you see portray what I would call pretty overt racism accurately, where it's done much more in this fashion of leaning into stereotypes, trying to exploit quote unquote black culture for profit without really giving a fuck about it, as opposed to this black people walking down the street and cops are wearing Klan hoods and whatever the fuck else. And I think part of what makes the satire work so well is the realistic nature of the family dynamics and his kind of day-to-day life. A pretty emotional scene right after that is he's out to lunch with his sister. All of a sudden, she just has a fucking heart attack and dies. It kind of comes out of nowhere. It's not built up to be this big dramatic thing. It's just sort of a thing that happens in life that's terrible, but that everyone, again, regardless of race, has to deal with. And I think what the very genuine and normal nature of the family dynamic does is allows the satire to feel as absurd as it should. The characters' identities don't just revolve around race. Not everything in their life is racially contextualized or motivated. They're just people. Particularly in the case of the movie, Hollywood and corporate America only view them as blacks instead of just normal people. So I think by including all these relatable struggles that are completely separate from race, it really emphasizes how absurd all of this nature of leaning into blackness is in media. We get a little appearance from Keith David as Jeffrey Wright, or Monk, is writing his book. And it's a funny way to do it because he's redoing the lines over and over, but making them more ghetto talk or ebonics or whatever word you want to use. And he just keeps rewriting. So the scene keeps being recreated and reacted out, but kind of dumber and more tropey each time. And something else pretty funny that it does is throughout the movie, whenever he's watching TV, it's black people in the show or movie. They're always slaves. They're always overcoming racism. They're gangbangers, just all the same shit. Again, just really leaning into how limited quote unquote black entertainment is. And the pacing on the movie is very smart. It breaks up these satirical elements with these little kind of monotonous day-to-day casual scenes. He's getting to know this woman Coraline throughout the movie that he's interested in. They're just eating ice cream. They're talking about what they like. His mom tells him that he's gained weight. There's not anything crazy or extravagant. It's just normal shit. And there's some really hilarious conversations throughout the movie as well. This is one of my favorite ones when he's talking to his brother Cliff, who's come out as gay, and he can hear him talking to somebody else. He's kissing some dude. He's got music on. He's like, "What are you doing?" And Cliff is like, "I've taken a lover. Do you have a problem with that, homophobe?" And he's like, "No, I don't care that you've taken a lover. I care that you used the phrase taking a lover." And I love it because it's both funny, but again, leaning into what makes this a good movie instead of dog shit is I think a much lesser movie might have tried to throw that in there, that he's some kind of latent homophobe, and you get a whole side plot about that isn't really necessary or add much to the story. And they actually do add in a little bit of homophobia with his mother later in the movie, but it feels like it's very natural and it's very brief, while also leading to a pretty good emotional scene without consuming a bunch of screen time to divert off the main track of the movie. John Ortiz is his literary agent, and you've probably seen him in other things. I always recognize him from Silver Linings Playbook, but he's also a kind of funny character in a more subtle way, where he doesn't really care about the moral ambiguity. He wants a cut of the money, obviously. So when his book Pathology first takes off and he's getting these massive offers for money, he's very reluctant. Right away, Arthur's like, don't you need money to take care of your mom? And kind of guilting him and pressuring him into it from the moral ground instead of the financial incentive, even though it's obviously his motivation. And I think it works super well from a storytelling perspective. If you want to have your character go against their own beliefs, to have them kind of forced to do it for something they care about greater than their pride and morals. And I love all the conversations between Arthur, Monk, and then whatever corporation or publisher that they're dealing with. Because to me, it just reeks of the writer of this movie's probably authentic experiences and kind of how condescending and buzzword laden they are, I imagine.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, this is he.
Oh, really?
Yeah, God damn it. Motherfucker.
Right, okay. Yeah, I was a little confused at first, but raw and real.
Yeah, you think some bitch-ass college boy can come up with that shit?
No, I don't. No.
And I love how blunt it is when the head of this committee says, oh, we've kind of been dinged for not having enough diversity and creating blind spots and all the same shit you hear if you've worked any corporate job. And he just very condescendingly responds, thanks for asking me to be on your committee because I'm black.
Like many American institutions, mine was recently rattled by the notion that our lack of diversity had led to a blind spot in our work. So, we're...
Let me say first, Carl, that I'm honored you choose me out of all the black writers you could go to out of fear of being called racist.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And to me, this is the exact type of racism that I 100% believe happens on a day-to-day basis in the Western world. Many people who are more classically liberal or libertarian, individualistic, whatever word you want to use, find it so degrading to just hire people based on quotas of immutable characteristics. And that doesn't even get into all the side effects of the problems that it creates of kind of embittered others who feel screwed over when they were more qualified or as qualified and kind of left out in the cold for things they can't control. There's also a part where he meets with kind of a studio producer about whether or not to turn the book into a movie. The guy is making fun of the very Oscar bait driven created movies, and he starts rattling off some of the things that he's done and his ideas.
You might be interested in this one we're about to shoot, actually. It's about this white couple. They get married on an old plantation in Louisiana, and all the slave ghosts come back and they murder everyone.
Dear God.
I know. It's great, right? It's called Plantation Annihilation.
And while they sound absurd, they don't actually sound too dissimilar to things that we've gotten in real life. And I think the knowing when to not go too far with your satire is also part of what helps it land here. And the movie, again, is just littered with really nice little moments. Monk finds out that their housekeeper, Lorraine, is getting married to the cop in town of their kind of little beach town that they live in and know everybody. And you can tell he's really caught off guard, but happy. Normally, he's not very included and he's kind of detached. And Jeffrey Wright is obviously a good enough actor that he can really show this huge range and all the nuance with it. Obviously, when he's doing the portrayal of a stereotype of a black guy, but also being uncomfortable, he's hilarious. And his performance just gives a lot of authenticity to these little nice moments as well. Here's the part of the movie I would say is definitely entering the satire element a little bit more, but honestly still feels believable to me, where he wants to change the name of his book from My Pathology to Fuck. And it just works so well because both as satire and a character moment. Obviously, as a character, he's super frustrated. He's kind of done with his whole charade. He can't believe how absurd and dumb it all is, and that these people will kind of just eat anything up that's just consumer garbage. With the joke being, of course, that they actually go along with it in earnest, and he can't believe it.
Why don't we just give us a second and a moment, and we will get right back to you. Let's do it.
What?
Very,
Black?
that's it. Yes, that's it. I'm happy you said it and not me.
One of the more serious moments that I think leads to a really good moment is when they're at the nursing home. Obviously, the mom is struggling with dementia, and she says to Cliff that she's glad he wasn't a queer, and he's obviously pretty upset by this. Because a few minutes later, he's kind of doing his drugs, and he's with these guys all in their underwear, and Lorraine and her husband and Monk all show up, and Monk is obviously super pissed and is like, just get out, I'll clean it up, like just go. And Cliff obviously feels bad that he forgot. And he says that he doesn't want to impose because Lorraine and the husband say you can stay. And they're kind of insistent that he stay because it's their wedding. And she says you can't impose your family and gives him a hug. Obviously just a super nice way of accepting him for who he is, even though his mom takes issue with his lifestyle. Just a really good little moment in there. And he also ends up having a fight with the girl that he's dating, Coraline, because she's reading his book, Fuck. And he gets pissed off about it and is like, how can you read that garbage? And is kind of being a dick, but he never really opens up about what's wrong because he's keeping this pretty big secret from everybody, obviously. And it's also a nice little touch that he's always got a glass of wine in his hand or something. He's always having a drink, but it's never really brought up or addressed. It's just kind of obvious that he's drinking consistently. And this leads to Cliff talking to Monk about kind of how he shuts people out, how similar he is to their dad who killed himself, and kind of how he regrets that their dad died without actually knowing who he was. And they had the discussion about whether or not it's better to have all yourself out there and be rejected or kind of hide the parts from you that might get rejected, which is clearly a struggle for Monk the entire movie. But again, just another way that the characters and their lives transcend race as an issue, and they're just dealing with things that everyone struggles with to really give the emotional weight to the movie that it needs, to really hammer home how kind of shallow and ridiculous the satirical components are of just narrowing people down to their skin color. And then one last part that I'll talk about that I think is really interesting is the scene between Monk and Sintra. She's the author who wrote the Weeze Lives in the Ghettos book and comes across as kind of a grifter, really leaning into all the stereotypes that he hates in her writing. And this is part of the committee where his book, Fuck, ends up actually winning the literary award. But Sintara essentially says that there's a market for it, so that's what she writes to when he's trying to kind of moralize and grandstand, which is interesting, obviously, because he's also doing both. He's grandstanding as himself, while the one who's benefiting financially is essentially the grifting bullshit that he's written. And she's fully embraced sort of who she is, which is a grifter. Although it's interesting because I don't think the movie actually really portrays her as very negative, as essentially just economically motivated and playing into the market. I'm not going to go too long on a sidebar here, but it really is kind of demoralizing sometimes how much the market incentivizes retardation. On my channel, I mostly stay away from political stuff, but my videos that have titles like "This movie is leftist trash" or "This movie is woke," which I've only done for April Fools, tend to get quite a bit more views, and it does make me wonder, would it be worth it to just lean into that completely? Now, for me, this isn't my job. It's just a hobby, but I can very easily see how someone just falls into that or slowly becomes that thing without realizing it. So right at the end of the movie, he goes up to get his literary award. And this is kind of where we go through the multiple endings that they could do. One is the screen just cuts to black. You don't know what his speech would be for the award. And then we see him talking to the plantation annihilation guy. And he's like, no, you can't do that because of blah, 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 blah. One they consider is him running off the podium to go reunite with Coraline. A bit more rom-com-y. He says, I don't know, the real Coraline won't talk to me when asked if she accepts him back. One is kind of poking more fun at the typical Blight movies where because his alias is a wanted fugitive, the cops come in, say the award looks like a gun, and then just shoot him like 100 times. And the one where he's going to get shot is the one that the guy goes, oh, it's perfect. Get ready for the award show. And then Cliff picks him up. And then we see the plantation annihilation cast guy, and he rides off into the sunset. A little bit open-ended for my taste, but I think you can take it as it's okay to do things that are financially beneficial without being a complete grifter, which I think is what the movie thinks about Sintara, or completely sticking to your principles that no one will read, so it doesn't matter, which is kind of his character at the beginning, to where he's trying to make something in between that's just a good movie in the movie. And I think it has a lot to say in a pretty reasonable and realistic fashion. I guess people who are super into the race stuff might get more out of it in that regard than I did. To me, the movie seems to be pretty limited to what Hollywood and corporations think of Black people, as opposed to a broader commentary on America or systemic racism or blah, blah, blah. But I'm gonna leave it there for this one. Highly recommend it. Really funny. Got some really good emotional moments. Just a good family story as well. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.